Hi, this is AJ Kennedy, and welcome to the Movie Health Podcast, a conversational show about movies for mental health. In each episode, we will interview healthcare professionals about their favourite movies and tips for mental health and see where it takes us. In episode 5, we're talking with Lynn Anderton. Lynn is a qualified life coach, gaining a diploma at Newcastle College in the UK. Lynn is also a movie therapist and started using movies in her work in 2007, where she completed Brigit Woltz movie therapy courses. This has led her to being supported by the Wirral Mind and the School of Social Entrepreneurs, SSE, to set up group sessions that allowed attendees to use movies to raise their self-esteem. In 2011, Lynn graduated from SSE as an Innovator for Health Fellow. Today, Lynn's work specifically services a subgroup of empaths who feel they overgive and underreceive, and how this behaviour and their personality traits affects how they balance relationships with their goals. So hi, Lynn. Welcome to the Movie Health Podcast. We're here to talk about your favourite movie, which I understand is Shopgirl.
Yes.
A movie that I hadn't seen before. Based on a book. Surprisingly, when I found out, by Steve Martin. So Steve Martin wrote a book by the same name, Shopgirl.
Yes.
I think it even had another title, but let's go with Shopgirl. And so that would have been around 2000. And in 2005, the film was released. And so Shopgirl, as the movie stars Steve Martin, they used the screenplay from Steve Martin as an adaptation from his book. It also stars Claire Danes and David Schwartzman,
Jason.
Jason.
Yes.
Should look directly at notes. Jason Schwartzman, who would have been of the I Love Huckabees fame and also the
Yes.
Wes
Yes.
Anderson films of the
Actor.
time. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And could you just set up the movie a little bit more and explain what the movie's about? And then I'd love to know why it's one of your favorite movies.
Okay. Basically, Claire Danes plays this character called Mirabelle Buttersware. Very unusual name. And she works behind the glove counter at Saks. Now, when you read some people's reviews of it, it's a mundane job. But I guess it's just a means to an end, really, because her character, Mirabelle, is actually qualified in art. I assume that's what she's gone to university for, around art, because she draws. And that's where her the like-mindedness between her and Jason's character, which is Jeremy, comes in, really, because they're both creative people. I guess then it sort of goes into that realm, the film, of there is two men that actually come into Mirabelle's life, and this is about who she chooses at one time or another, and how that really goes right throughout the film of how her relationship with Ray, and how Jeremy would like to be in her life, but keeps making these. I suppose he's quite socially inept, isn't he? He just doesn't get it right, really. But you can see that his efforts there are quite genuine.
So Ray is the character played by Steve Martin.
Yes.
Who I believe he's a millionaire from Seattle, and
yes,
he's traveling and he's always traveling, has houses everywhere. It's probably in his mid to late 40s, single. So he's probably one end of the spectrum from Jason's character.
Yes. Yes, they're both very
Right.
different. Yes.
Very different. But I'd say Jeremy and Mirabelle are probably of the same age.
Yes.
But yet Mirabelle is, a lot more mature, working a steady job, does have other interests, whereas Jeremy is, probably of the age of just floundering and trying to find out what he wants to do. He's, I think, a
Yes.
graphic artist, and eventually, goes on is a roadie for a band for a period of the
Yes.
time. And so there's ultimately, however, a love triangle between the three of them.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes, I would. I think it's just because I suppose Mirabelle wants to connect in some way, which Steve Martin, his character, narrates through the film. So it talks about that, her wanting to connect in some way to someone, and I think it's working out who that someone really is. And I guess Jeremy's character doesn't quite get it right at the beginning, but you can
No.
see that he genuinely has feelings for her, but he just doesn't get it right. Whereas Ray's character seems to have a lot more charm about him, which he wins her over, I guess, for a time.
However, both Ray and Jeremy struggle with commitment, or are
Yes.
unsure about how they want to commit to Mirabelle.
Yes.
Mirabelle wants a relationship. She wants a partner in life, but struggles with both the male characters to really, and certainly throughout the film, establish some type of relationship, some type of commitment to the relationship.
Yes, that's right. And I think that's very prevalent in dating. I think people are wary of when they come out of some relationships, what they're going into, and I guess it's just about getting to know that person. And sometimes people jump into relationships and don't know what they want.
A couple of themes within the movie. So one theme which we've already touched on is relationships and commitment. Certainly relationships. In that particular theme, Mirabelle quite quickly tells Ray that she loves him, as I remember it, which then really puts Ray in a position, because he is not someone that really wants to commit to a relationship.
Yes, he makes it clear that he's too busy. He's going between these two cities.
Yeah.
So he doesn't. He wants it to be more open. But when you see the scene where Ray is with his therapist, then it's a totally different conversation. In that he says that he's just really using Mirabelle while he's in LA, which and it's all about misunderstandings, really, isn't it? Because people say things, but somebody misunderstands what that means, and then maybe it isn't clear between them and whether they want the same thing.
And the complication that Mirabelle and Ray experience, so we've touched on I suppose the dynamics of Ray as a character, but in Mirabelle's case, I believe the movie addresses and the fact that she's on antidepressants.
Yes.
Given her, how things are going with Ray, she stops taking those antidepressants.
Yes.
Which then ultimately heightens her depression, and that's not obviously, but that's also where some of the complications come in with their relationship. Is there anything you can talk on? And I suppose that would be the other theme that I noticed, is that element of depression within the movie.
Yes, and I think at the start of relationships, people have that surge of those feel good hormones, so they feel that they do. I can actually understand why Mirabel stops taking the antidepressants, because she feels that surge of hormones from the relationship she's in with Red. So she stops taking them, and then once after a time, she's obviously hits a wall where she feels low again, and that's where it becomes a bit complicated. But he's quite caring about it. But I think that's quite usual in some relationships where it can be quite intense. And I think it was quite intense between them when they start dating. And I think that's what she wants to experience at that time. But I suppose it's because it doesn't last. Those experiences, those feelings don't last. And it can't develop. Whereas somebody who maybe you're on, that's a relationship that's progressed a bit slower and develops, is maybe not as intense as that. So she wouldn't have felt that need to let go of her antidepressants. She'd have felt quite stable.
And so, is there any particular reason the movie either connects with you, resonates with you? Fascinated to know why it comes to mind as one of your favourite movies.
Because I had that same experience as Mirabel. I wasn't taking antidepressants, but I was in a relationship that was very intense.
Okay.
Yes, and I had those same experiences as Mirabel in the terms of it was exciting. He was buying me things. It was, and it did last for a number of years. But me, it felt I was vulnerable going into it, and I felt, I suppose I felt a certain amount of control from this partner. But what I learned over the years was that I had to take some responsibility for the part that I played in it, because I was willing to do that. And I think that's what resonates with me, that it's about being aware of your own of your own feelings within that relationship, that you have to be very aware that this isn't just about dating. It is about finding out about somebody and whether you can make that work. So that's really where it resonates with me.
Her heart is broken with the way it goes with Ray. I think Ray even finds another partner. But she takes I suppose she learned from the experience with Ray. She's taken more responsibility, as you said. And Mirabel slowly, but in her own way, starts to build a relationship with Jeremy, and realizes that they're of similar interests, similar age, and within time they'll potentially have a long-term relationship. But as you said, Mirabel does go through the pain of the relationship with Ray to just realize she needs to go with Jeremy, but at least be mentally prepared and acknowledge her, as you said, sort of her responsibility and what the things that she needs to do to have a healthy relationship.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And I love the scene where they get back together, where he takes her out. My treat, he calls it. And at the end of when he takes her home, and she says, "Why did you do all this? this success, because he's actually been on a bit of a journey himself, hasn't he? Because he goes away and learns how he can win her over, I guess, by learning about how to be in a relationship with women. But also he finds this success. He gets his act together, he smartens himself up, and he said, well, you said just do it. So he did, and it's nice that he's taken that on board really from her, and it wasn't really very much. And then he says, I'll protect you, which is really sweet, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, taking on his own responsibilities.
Yes.
And acknowledging again things that he needs to do to have a healthy relationship. And I think it's fair to say all three characters go through their own transformation.
Yes.
So even though Ray, we see Ray, successful businessman, I think he was recently divorced, or certainly single, attracted to a younger woman, fantasizing about that world, but ultimately ends up with someone of a similar age and on a similar stage, in a similar stage of their life. And the same goes for both Mirabelle and Jeremy, I'd say. So it is interesting to see how the three of them transform and go through their own journeys.
Yes, and it's all quite different in some ways, isn't it? Each journey is different.
Is there any other scenes or quotes from the movie that particularly resonate with you? And I suppose additional to that, is it a movie that you would revisit?
Oh, constantly. Yes, it is one that I can't constantly revisit. Yes.
And so, given that you went through a similar experience, I'm sure that there's that can be difficult to relive. What role does the movie play in when you watch it and you maybe even think about what had gone on in the past?
Some scenes are still painful.
Mm.
Most of the time it is about finding out about people, but sometimes we don't always know what people's intentions are.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and you can get that perspective, the power of movies in a way allows you to get a different perspective.
Yes.
See a certain situation from another person's point of view. And in particularly in a relationship, depending on the health of that relationship, it takes two, and those two people will act a certain way, be experiencing things a different way. And sometimes when you're very close to it, it's hard to see all perspectives. Is that fair to say?
Yes, definitely. And I think intimate relationships can be like that. Or you're really wanting something to work out because you want to connect, that you fail to see sometimes the truth of what's really going on. And I think that's where the film, because the two males are, it's a contrast, isn't it? One, Jeremy is particularly maybe too truthful, whereas Ray maybe isn't always as truthful. She's having to learn about his personality, which she does by the end, obviously. But for me, it brings out. There's also a lot of positives within the film in how they proceed towards their own success.
Yeah.
But I think for me, as with a lot of films, the characters become my friends, because sometimes outside of movies, sometimes some people don't always understand your motives of how you're trying to connect. So having that tool is just a good way of realizing that you're not alone, that other people are experiencing this, even though you're not in close contact with them. And I know other people experience this, but I don't always come into contact with them. But seeing it on screen and seeing those characters playing it out is sometimes good for my mental health.
Absolutely. So thank you. I hadn't seen the movie before, and I also didn't realize that Steve Martin had written a book, and wonder where the inspiration for him came from to write.
Yes, I've wondered that myself.
Because for him to ultimately play the character of Ray, I wonder if for whatever reason he saw a little bit of Ray in him. So I could see that as conceivable, given that he's a famous, wealthy actor. I'm not sure of his relationship status or then or now. But there's difficulties to living that type of life.
Yes.
So when I was watching it for the first time, and then I realized, Steve Martin wrote the book, and he decided to take on the character of Ray. You do wonder about the reasoning behind it. But as I said, the three characters that are involved in it go through their own journey. There's things to learn from each of those characters. And if you could sort of summarize, I suppose, some main themes from the movie, what do you think they would be?
In terms of mental health?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say about looking at how some connections affect you, really. I guess it's because when you see Mirabelle's journey of how that plays out, she virtually goes through grief after coming out of that relationship, and that's not a bad thing, but sometimes it's I guess it's you have to be aware of how connecting to some people, how the effect is on your mental health.
Mm.
And that may be hard to work out at the beginning. That's just part of the process, isn't it? Of going into relationships. But I do think she realizes that for herself, and sometimes that's just a process. So, and I think in terms of mental health, that's what I would say, that is a process that sometimes we have to go through, and it's not something that we can always avoid. The other thing I would say is about not dismissing creative pursuits as a way of helping with mental health, because actually it runs very well alongside conventional other therapies and medication, obviously. And as you can see, Mirabelle used what was probably her drawing to help her mental health, because it's absorbing and it helps people to concentrate and feel that they are achieving something. So I think it's very useful to be able to use creative means.
Okay.
And also, I would say about accepting people for who they are. It's acceptance, I think, is the key at the end of the day, and I think that sort of comes to light at the end of the film, that we have to accept that we can't always be sometimes with people that we want to be with, or in situations that we want to be in. Sometimes we have to accept that that's not going to work. We have to choose what works for ourselves.
But thank you so much. Great that we could.
Thank you for having me.
And look forward to more recommendations.
Okay.